Success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. With this positive thought, I, Suman Kaushik, SST teacher at St. Mary's Public School, welcome you all my dear students of class 7th. Today children, we are going to revise our all 3 SST chapters. Let's move. Let's start our revision of our all 3 chapters which we have completed earlier. Geography lesson 1, Civics lesson 1, History lesson 1. First, we will start with Geography lesson 1, our environment. What is the meaning of environment? Environment refers to all the external conditions in which an organism lives. In simple language, we also can say the earth is the home of human beings and other living organisms. This is possible due to the presence of favorable living conditions which make up their environment. That is why Earth is also called a unique planet. It has two components, natural environment and human-made environment. Let's discuss separately. Natural environment. Natural environment consists of all living and non-living things that occurs naturally on Earth. For example, mountains, rivers, vegetation, animals, etc. are created by nature. So, they are called the natural environment. It also comprises two components, biotic and abiotic. Biotic is also called biological components, consist of all living things like plants, animals and human beings. Abiotic is also called physical components, consist of non-living things like land, water and air. Now children, here I want to clear one more thing. The biotic and abiotic environments together are also called the domains of Earth. Children, do you remember you have already learnt about the 4 major domains of the Earth in class 6. So let us refresh our knowledge about these four domains with the help of this diagram which is given below. So look at this picture which clearly describes that biosphere is a narrow zone on Earth where the lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere meet. It is also called the living world and consists of the plant and animal kingdoms. It is the zone where all living beings interact with each other and to support life on Earth. So here already I have given you the example of non-living environment which is termed as abiotic environment. Next point is the various changes in the environment take place due to the natural process and human activities. Human environment. The human beings are part of the environment in which they live. Now we can understand with one more example. The human-made elements such as agriculture, industries, settlements, means of transport, etc. are created by human beings. That is why it is called human-made environment. Human beings develop these features to live comfortably in their environment. Children, next is ecosystem. The interaction between the organisms and their physical environment in a particular area is called the ecosystem. The organisms in a biosphere are interdependent. The size of ecosystem varies greatly. It can be as large as the rainforest, grasslands, deserts or as small as pond. I want to clear it more by giving one more example. So, elements of the ecosystem interact with each other. All the biotic components are dependent on each other and also interact with the abiotic components. For example, in a small pond, all the living organisms like plants, insects and fish depend on each other and also on their physical environment like water and sunlight. So children, I hope now it is very much clear to all of you what is ecosystem. In the last, environmental pollution is the result of unplanned and unwise use of technology by human beings. And this is true because the rapid development led to changes in the natural environment and caused a lot of environmental issues. What are the activities like construction, agriculture, mining, transportation and overpopulation are adversely affecting the natural environment. The changes are taking place so rapidly that the nature is not able to repair the damage. Global warming, extinction of a large number of plants, animals and birds, and pollution of air and water are some of the consequences of technological advancement and consequent harm done to the environment. So to save our environment, efforts have to be made to maintain a healthy balance between human environment and nature. So children, I hope this video will be helpful for you all to understand the chapter better and can help you in revising your chapter. So next chapter from civics, lesson 1, democracy. Democracy. People are the most important source of power in a democracy. We also can say, in other words, that democracy implies the rule of common people. Most of the countries in the world today are democracies. They have granted equal voting rights to all their citizens. Abraham Lincoln beautifully described the word democracy by saying that it's a government of the people, by the people and for the people. So it's mean the supreme power lies with the people. There is no authority superior to the people of the country. Number 2, India has a democratic republic because we have both the head of the government or the prime minister and the head of the state or president elected by the people. So children, in order to understand the merits of democracy, let's know about the other forms of government that also exist. We have two other forms of government, monarchy and dictatorship. Monarchy means the rule by a king or queen, and a dictatorship means the rule by an individual or a group of people. As a head of state, both the monarchs and the dictator hold absolute powers and are above the law. They are not accountable to the people. So, Brunei is an existing example of an absolute monarchy and North Korea is an existing example of dictatorship. So now we could understand the importance of democracy, why it is a favored form of government in the world. So let's understand the key elements of democracy in detail one by one. Number 1, equality. Our constitution clearly defines that all the people are equal before the law. It means that every person, be it President of India or a common citizen, has to obey the same law. Number 2, no one can be discriminated against on the basis of his, her caste, religion, place of birth, property, gender, etc. Number 3, regular elections after a fixed period of time ensures that people have a right to elect the government back to power or change it if they are dissatisfied with it. Number 4, political parties have to fulfill their promises in order to get re-elected. Number 5, universal adult franchise ensures political equality in a democracy. It is a feature unique to a democracy. On attaining 18 years, the right to vote is given to all the adult citizens regardless of their economic background, race, religion, language, caste, gender, etc. No one can be restricted on any of the mentioned grounds from casting his or her vote. People use their voting right in order to elect their representative. Next is political parties. So children, in India we have a largest democracy. It follows a multi-party system. Every political party stands for an ideology. Their main purpose is to win vote of the voters and form the government. In their election manifestos, parties formulate policies and promises which they want to implement after winning the election. After the general elections, the party that gets majority of seats is declared as the winning party. This winning party forms the government and is called the ruling party, and the other parties that are in minority together form the opposition. So I hope now it is clear to all of you how our political parties work. Last is coalition government. Coalition means in order to get a clear majority and to form the government, a political party must get more than 50% votes. The Lok Sabha has 545 seats or members. To form the government, a political party must get at least 272 votes. But sometimes a situation arises when no political party gets simple or clear majority. Then some political parties come together to form the government, and such a government is called a coalition government. So children, let me wind up the revision by adding conclusion that we want to live in a world that is equal and everyone is treated fairly. Democracy is the only form of government in which people are free to express their views, form the government and expect equal treatment. Rule of law prevails and conflicts are resolved based on laws. There are some of the elements that make democracy the most favored form of government all over the world. So now let's move on to our next chapter. Chapter is from History, Lesson 1, Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Number 1. The 8th to 18th century is regarded as the medieval period in India. But children, before explaining this point, I want to remind you about your previous class where you already have studied about ancient Indian history, because the study of the past can be divided into 3 periods in order to clearly understand the time frames. So in this class, you will learn about medieval Indian history, and in your next class, you will learn about the modern Indian history. Now get back to the point. The medieval period in India covers about thousands years from 8th century to 18th century CE. This period witnessed certain developments that differentiated from the ancient period. The medieval history of India can further be subdivided into 2 phases. The first phase stretched from the 8th century to 13th century and is referred to as the early medieval period, while the second phase was from the 13th century to 18th century and is referred to as the later medieval period. I hope children, now the time frame is very much clear to all of you. Next point is, India was earlier called the Bharatvarsha or the land of Bharatas. Now children, this is quite interesting to note that the India was known by different names at different points in history. Bharatvarsha and Jambudvipa are 2 of the earliest names by which our country was known in ancient times. India was also known as the land of the people who lived along the river Sindhu. Next is the Muslims called the subcontinent Hindustan. Now here I want to add more. The way we understand Hindustan today is quite different from what it was understood in medieval times. For example, according to some medieval scholars, Hindustan comprises territories that were a part of Delhi Sultanate. On the other hand, Babur, the founder of Mughal Empire, used the term Hindustan to describe the geography and natural vegetation of the subcontinent. Isn't it amazing? Let's move on to next point. But children, before explaining this point, I want to add some other historical developments which happened during this period. So we'll discuss them one by one. Number 1, the coming of the Muslims led to the growth of mixed culture. There was interaction between North and South India and between the Hindus and Muslims. The cultural exchanges led to the growth of a culture that was above regional and caste differences. It was an Indian culture. Number 2, the Muslim dynasties, particularly the Mughals, provided many centuries of political stability to the country. This led to an increase in trade and the rapid growth of the towns and cities. Number 3, during this period, new technologies like Persian wheel and spinning wheel were introduced. Number 4, new food crops and beverages like potatoes, chilies, corn, tea and coffee also arrived in Indian subcontinent. Now next is Rajputs, Sikhs, Marathas, Jats, Ahoms. They became powerful during this period. And next, people were divided on the basis of jati, caste, occupation and
background. So I hope this all changes is right now clear to all of you. Next is the cartography. Children, as you can see the two pictures given below, these are the pictures of two maps which I have drawn in different eras. One is from 12th centuries, another is from 17th century, and both the maps clearly defines the clarity of Indian subcontinent. So cartography. Cartography is the art or skill of drawing maps during this period. And the person who makes map is referred to as a cartographer. In ancient India, the skill of cartography was almost unknown. The growth of trade and expansions of empires created the need for accurate maps. The Arabs and the Europeans developed cartography as they traveled long distances across land and sea. Contact with them introduced cartography in India, and this was quite amazing. So children, I want to wind up my revision by giving one more information about the sources which provides us detailed information about medieval periods. So we have two main sources, archaeological and literary. Archaeological sources available to us including temples, palaces, mosques, forts, coins, inscriptions, ornaments and paintings, and they gives us an idea of the political, social and economic history of that time. Next is literary source. Written records of the medieval period are found in plenty. Paper was easily available during this period. Therefore, most writings of this period is on paper. Literary source includes chronicles of court historians, biographies, autobiographies, famines and correspondence of the kings. So children, there is an abundance of sources for this period. That is why we know much more about the medieval period than the ancient period. So that's all about our revision of all three chapters. Thank you.
So children, I hope this video would have been helpful to clarify all your doubts. Now our course for self-assessment test is over, so I request you all to please revise your all chapters thoroughly from the book and PPTs. One more information I want to share with you regarding your online self-assessment test, which will be conducting in upcoming week and will be of 20 marks and carrying MCQ based questions. So please read the general instructions carefully before attempting the paper. Thank you and all the very best.